All right, guys, welcome. Welcome to this installment of our new 2.7.3 support webinars. My name is Aaron Leacock. Today we're going to be talking about project transfer, our status transfer, and our full transfer. We're going to jump right into it here. The project transfer is a way to allow users to zip a copy of a job in Fab with some other options as well, which we'll go over here shortly, into a single zip file to make it easier to send to other customers, upload to an FTP site, whatever you need to do with it, use it for a backup. And then when the other customer gets it, they can easily unzip it and SDS2 puts it in the locations that are desired. To pack a project, we use our project transfer here on the main menu. If I click project transfer, I will get my project transfer window. On the left-hand side, I have my project packing information. Here I can select which job repository I want to search for a job in. I can also select the job in the Fabricator. By default, these are filled out to the current job in Fabricator that's in the job I'm currently in. And I can select the output location, the directory to where I want to save this file to. So I can browse and save this to my desktop. And I can select the packed file name. This is going to be the name of the actual zip file. This does not change the name of the job and Fab folder inside the zip file, just the name of the zip file itself. So I can add whatever I want to this. And then I also have options down here, advanced options for status configurations, plugins, and reports. If these are checked, this copies the comp_status folder, the plugins folder, and the reports folder from the directory, from your data directory, and puts it in this zip folder so they're available with this copy of the job that you were to send to somebody. With those checked and my directory saved to where I want it to save to, I'm just going to go ahead and pack the job I'm currently in. And it'll go through and finalize packing everything in the job. And I notice on my desktop here I have my status zip here. If I open this up, I have my job and Fab data, which contains my job and Fabricator information. I also have my plugins, reports, and status folders. To unpack a job once it gets to the destination it needs to be, I can browse for this file to unpack. So I can browse to my desktop here. And I can select my status transfer job here that I created and say open. And my only option for the unpack is where do I want my job to go, what job repository do I want my job to go. I'm going to leave it my default repository so it goes there. And I can say unpack. One thing to point out here is the unpack, there is no renaming options. So if you have a job or a Fab that's already in the location with the same name of the job and Fab in the zip file, the only option you get is to overwrite it yes or no. So I can say yes or no to this to overwrite the information. I'm going to say no. And if I wanted to at this point, it's going to unzip the status and plugins and reports folders. If I wanted to, I could go in and change the folder name then and re-unpack this new folder to get a fresh copy in there in the location if I wanted to. When it unzips that status plugin reports folder, it puts them all in the actual job folder itself. So I'm going to find my 7.3b jobs, and I should find my status transfer. I have my plugins folder, which is always in a job. I also have a status and reports folder that I can copy these reports or status configurations out of if I wanted to into my directory. So if there are specific reports and status configurations that they need with this job, you could include them. All right, so that's the status transfer, or excuse me, the project transfer. Once the customer gets the job and they've update a bunch of status information, we can use the status transfer to export that and send it back to the original model. Status transfer allows the user to export and import member status and custom property informations between copies of the same job. This can be very useful with model approving and when approving is being done on a copy of the original job. They can simply import a status transfer XML file and get the updated status, member status, and any updated custom member properties from that approver. It is also recommended to note, I'm going to note this here, that you want to use version 7.320 and above when using status or full transfer. There have been some speed increases done in those versions, so it's recommended that you use 7.320 and above if you plan on using the status or full transfer options. It's also need to be pointed out that the install for 7.320 needs to be done on the server machine, not just a client install of 7.320. The server install on the server will update all the information needed for the speed increases. Once 7.320 is installed on that server machine, any previous versions of 3.20 will not be able to run the full transfer because of the changes made to that file. So those are the information you need to know about that. To run a status transfer, once all the information, the approval information, custom properties have been updated, and the copy of the job, I can go to status transfer right here on the main menu. When that comes up, I'll have a few options here. The export import to, this allows me to select what type of station it's going to be imported or exported from. If I select like approval, I only have the approval tab selectable. If I have it set to full station, I have all tabs available to me. These tabs are associated with the custom property information that are created. Because of that, you need to have either the default design data or the electronic approval flavors or any saved derivatives of those schemas, those flavors, so that the correct schema names are used in the project for us to be able to export this correct information. The import-export option is, again, just to set it whether I'm going to import or export the XML file. And the data source is basically a select by option to where you can select by members or by sheets. And that just changes what selection method you have to select the member information, whether it's by sheets or by members themselves. And the all checkbox, this exports all members or all sheets. These tabs, it's the select all and clear all on these tabs only affect the tab that they're on. So if I select all, my approval tab does not select all as well. It's just the status and those tabs individually. So make sure that you have what selected that you want to export or import. It is important to note that even if I have the approval tab here, select all, but I set this to a erector station, these checkboxes are still checked, and that information is still exported even though I don't have access to it to change it. So I want to make sure that all my information that I want to export is selected correctly before I go through and actually export the information. So I'm gonna go ahead and export some status information here. At the bottom, I have two options: print report and zip XML file. The print report only affects imports, so it prints a report of what's been changed in the model. During export, this doesn't print anything. And the zip XML file basically creates the XML file into a gzip file. This file, when it's imported, automatically unzips itself in our utility. And it can be unzipped with like 7-zip or some other unzipping utilities. It just allows the file to be compressed smaller than what it normally be for the XML. When I have it set to members, I'm going to say OK. From the main menu here, all I have is just a straight list of member piece marks to select from. That's all I have currently. So I can select some members if I want to and say OK. And it's going to ask me to save this XML file. So I can browse to, let's say, my desktop. And I'm going to save this, say OK. And it'll create my status transfer. If I open this folder up, I have my XML that's been gzipped. That if I wanted to look at that, I could. The full transfer, which is a add-on, or no, I shouldn't say add-on, it's some extra stuff added to the status transfer, can only be ran from my model. So I have to go into my model. Once in my model, on my toolbar, I have a full transfer icon here, which is like yellow, looks like yellow folders in a circle. If you brought up a toolbar from 7.2, or if you've made a custom one, you took this off, or you don't have this on there anymore, this can be added to your toolbar from your toolbar configuration under Options and under the command group Model Parametric. If I scroll down, I will have both my full transfer and my status transfer icons I can add to my toolbar. You can also add these as a keyboard shortcut or a right-click menu shortcut. Either way, you can run those from that way as well. Once I have those on my toolbar, I can say OK. The full transfer allows me to add other model information like CNC, IFC models, sheets, and also bill of material information. This information is used with other software like FabSuite and StruM.I.S to acquire model information in their softwares. So a lot of the information is the same between the status and the transfer at the top here. The big difference is the transfer type is in here. I have three options. I have full all data, full choose data, and status only. Status only is going to give me my status export, just like the main menu did. The full choose data allows me to select which information here of the additional information that I want to include, and full all data will export everything that's selected. If I set to full choose data, I can again select my data source. Again, this is a select by option, members or sheets, and I have an option to include bill of material. Include bill of material basically dumps all the bill of material information for each member selected into the XML file with the model information. It is up to the receiving software, however, to decipher or use this bill of material information instead of the model information. Checking this just includes this in the file for the receiving software to use. The drawings options allows me to select, I can include the drawing files, gather sheets, and erection sheets, and I can set the format to setup determined, which is going to be your drawing conversion, your DXF, DWG file formats, or I can select PDF to export PDF versions of the drawings or the erection and gather sheets as well. The additional file option over here, I can say include CNC, I can include IFC, and I have options for the holes, bolts, and welds, like my IFC options. Main material, sub-material, just which piece marks do I want it to grab. The main material, if I'm using member material piece marking options for to match the member mark, or just the sub-material piece marks, it'll grab the material marks out of the model. These additional options are going to be based on whether or not you have those in your license file. So if you do not have the option to export an IFC through ModelLink, you cannot export an IFC through full transfer. So it is dependent on your license file still. And the CNC is going to download whatever your current CNC configuration is set to. So if it was set to DSTV on the main menu, that's what it's going to export. The status information at the bottom is all going to be the exact same as the status export. You have your different tabs here, and the print report and zip XML as well will be the same options. From the model, if I have it set to members, I can say OK, and it's going to ask me to select my members to export. So when I'm running it from the model, and this is the same way with the status transfer as well, I can actually select my models visually instead of from just a list. So I can use this with a status display that would possibly mask members based on maybe I only want sequence 1. I can mask everything but sequence 1 and then just select the model to select all of sequence 1 for this export. Once I select my members, I can right-click and say OK or hit Enter. And then any sheets that I were to have selected, I can select the sheets as well. I don't have any erection sheets in this job, so I'm just going to say OK. And I'll go through and run the full transfer. So I'm able to export PDF for the sub materials and my IFC warning that comes up. On the desktop here, or excuse me, I save it to my output. If I find my 7.3 directory here and find my output folder, I have my full transfer here. I've ran this a couple times, so there's a couple additional files in here. But I'll have my XML file, my IFC file, my drawings, all my drawings that were exported, and my CNC files. Those are all my CNC files that I have in this job. So that's all in the single full transfer folder that was created. The full transfer is primarily going to be used for sending to other softwares like FabSuite and StruM.I.S. They're currently the softwares that use the full transfer XML and IFC information. Both of those are works in progress. They work great. There's a few little things we're tweaking here and there, so we're always adding things and fixing things. So just be aware of that. If you run across anything when you're doing this between FabSuite or StruM.I.S, let us know. Let FabSuite or StruM.I.S know as well, and we can work with them to try to get anything resolved. For the most part, though, it works pretty slick and back and forth transferring the status information. On the main menu here for the MRP interface, the FabSuite is going to take just the regular full transfer. StruM.I.S, if you're just StruM.I.S customers, or if you use StruM.I.S, under the MRP interface there's a specific StruM.I.S export. And what this does is this export replaces the spaces in any of the descriptions or section sizes, anything like that, with dashes. And that allows us in StruM.I.S to follow the naming conventions for structural steel products for use in electric data interchange, or the EDI, which was set forth by the AISE. So that's what this export will do for StruM.I.S and us to be able to match those naming conventions. So if you're using StruM.I.S, you can export right here from the main menu for the full transfer. It's all it is. It's a modified full transfer. If I hit export, it's just going to bring up my full transfer window here, so I can export any information I want. Once the approver has updated status and custom property information, and I want to update that back into my model, he sent me that XML file, and I want to update that in my model. I'm going to come back to my model here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load a status display really quick from my desktop, my approval status. So right now you can see everything in my model is not reviewed. I have nothing reviewed in this model. He sent me some status for some approval information that I want to use, so I'm going to go to my status transfer, and I can import a file. I'm going to make sure I go through here and only pick the information I actually want to import. The more options you have checked, the longer it'll run. So if you only want to import specific information from an XML file, go through and just make sure those checkboxes are turned on. It'll speed up the speed of the import. So right now I'm just going to check my approval status and my receive from approval date, and I'm going to make sure my print report's turned on, so I get a printout of what SDS2 changed on the import, and I can say OK. And I need to browse for my XML file that he sent me. So I'm going to browse for my status transfer XML that he created. I'll say OK and OK. And it'll go through and update my approval statuses. And I get this little printout here. Import results. It gives me old value, new value. Now when SDS2 imports values, we do some checking to make sure things don't get overwritten when necessary, or where we can check. With date fields, anytime there's a date in the XML file and either that date is newer than the date in the model, or the date in the model is set to not set, we will overwrite that information. If the date is older, or in the XML file it is set to not set, we will not overwrite any current date it's in the model. The combo boxes are overwritten all the time, so no matter whatever's in the XML file is what gets set. So if I look at some of these, I can see that it updated the approval date and the approval status for me, so I can edit. Let's say I edit one of my columns here, and I look at my status information. I have my receive from approval date and approval status set for this member now. So I can import all that information, update it to what he's done in his model, what's approved, and all that stuff. With strings, string fields, in this case, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add in my properties, my custom properties, I'm going to add a user comment. I'm just going to call this test1 in my approval and say OK. I'm going to do the same thing down to this column down here. Test1 and say OK. and OK. And I'm going to import that same file again, only this time I'm going to go to my approval tab and import just my user comment 1, because that's the only thing I want to import right now. So I'm going to say, make sure it's import, print report, and say OK. And I'll browse for my XML file again and say OK. And now I have my update of what it's gone through. It's updated some new values to user comment 1 from my XML file. There's a comment in there. It's updated some of these. If I say OK and edit this column now, I put a tag in here just called test1, but because there was a string value for this user comment field in the XML file, it's going to overwrite whatever's in my current model. So as long as there's a string field in the XML, it overwrites whatever's in the model. If there's nothing in the string field in the XML, or it's blank, it will not overwrite what's in the model. So if I go into my properties on this column here, I can see my test1 is still in there because there was nothing in the XML file for that member under user comment 1. So string values will only overwrite if the XML has a value in it. The last one here is Boolean, or just the checkboxes or the little radio buttons. If I came up to my member up here, B11, and let's say I've come in and I need to make this held, so I'm going to come in here and set in a date held, and I'm going to say it's held now. I can say OK, and so I've held that myself. If I were to import my XML file again and say that he's done some hold status stuff as well, I can update that. I'm going to turn off my approval user comment, and I can say OK. Browse for my XML file and say OK again. It'll go through and update my held status information, and no status is changed, and here's one that's changed back to not held. So with the radio buttons, they overwrite no matter what. So whatever is in the XML file is what gets set. So in this case, if I edit this B11 again and go to my status, this member hold status is set back to not set because that's what's in the XML file. My date, however, did not get overwritten or removed because in the XML file it was set to not set. So because it has a date in the model, the not set does not overwrite a current date in the model. So it's something to be aware of when you're importing files. If you're doing stuff and the approval is exporting information, to not make yourself do extra work and have to redo that again in your model. Something to be aware of. Last few things here that I want to cover. When you select group members, we export the information for the individual sub-members themselves, and we import the information for our sub-members ourselves. It's important for the approver or whoever is doing any sort of status or custom property information, make sure they set the information on each of the individual sub-members themselves, not just the overall group member. With simple like approval statuses, the main group member status is applied to everything in all the sub-members by default. But custom properties, you just want to make sure that all the custom properties and statuses are set the way that you expect them to be, so we can import the information correctly for each piece. A lot of customers will have custom user properties. They've created their own schemas. They've modified their own member.py file so that's in their little tabs and everything like that. You can modify the export here to include your user custom properties that you created. The file that you need to modify is in your data directory under your macro folder. And macro lib, there is a SDS2 data transfer folder. The SDS2 data transfer.py is the file that will need to be modified to include your user custom properties. You can modify this to include it so it exports the information, imports the information. If you need to do that between your approver or the engineer, you have some custom ones you've created for them, you'll need to modify that. We're not going to get into it in this webinar, but give us a shout out at support, and we can help you walk through trying to add that to the export and import on that data transfer. But the one thing I want to mention about this is this file gets overwritten every single time SDS2 is installed. So if you modify this, you want to make sure you make a backup of it somewhere. Either rename a file and put it in the same location so it's not the exact same name, or save it to another location so that you have it, because every time SDS2 is installed, this file gets overwritten. So you want to have a backup of it that you can copy back in when SDS2 installs over it. All right, guys, that's all I have for the status and full transfer with the product transfer as well. If you have any questions about it, feel free to shoot us an email or give us a call at support, or use the chat feature as well if you have a simple email. Otherwise, have a great day, guys, and talk to you guys later.